Here's a 2-hour free preview of my complete Adobe Premiere Pro course. It's going to give you a taste of what you will be learning. It contains the first 3 sections of the course where you'll get oriented to Adobe Premiere Pro, as well as learn some of the basics of video editing. If you look at the full course outline, which I'll link to down below with a discounted link, you can see all of the sections where we go in depth into everything from titles and graphics to color correction and grading, audio editing, exporting, all sorts of video styles, bonus projects, and so much more, as well as the downloadable project files and clips so that you can follow along. Everything is included in the full course, which you can get for the cost of your next lunch. If you're not ready to take that step yet right now, enjoy the next 2 hours completely free on me. Thanks so much and have a beautiful day. Welcome to this first lesson where we're diving right into Premiere Pro. So what I'm gonna do first is open up Premiere Pro as if I was starting from scratch without any existing project. So I'm on a Mac. Things will look a little bit different if you're on a PC, but generally they are going to be the same. So if you open up Premiere Pro for the very first time, you will see something like this. I'm using the CC 2021 version of Premiere Pro, and over the past several years, they've made some minor changes, and I want to make sure that if you're using a newer version or if you're using an older version, this course will still be very applicable. If there's any major changes to how things are done, I will make sure to update the lessons. So that being said, when you open up Premiere Pro, you have the option to open up a previous project that you've worked on this home screen here. But of course, if you haven't edited in Premiere Pro before, you won't have any of those projects. Or start a new project. There's also a Learn tab and some other features that are more advanced, like a new team project where you can work with multiple people on the same project, even if you're not on the same computer, basically. If you click New Project, you'll get a window like this. And this is where you set your settings for your project. So the first thing you need to do is title it, call it whatever we want, new project. That's very creative. Next is the location. So you can click down and choose a recently used folder, or click browse and find a specific folder or place in your Finder or documents. Down below, you have some other options. All of these are dependent on your computer, the type of memory and hard drives that you have. And so all of this is going to be standard towards your computer, so don't worry about it. This first one, though, if I would just choose the recommended one if you have that option. Otherwise, I would just leave it as is. Some of this stuff is a little bit more advanced. For scratch disks, this is important though. I think it's important to leave it same as project unless you have a very specific reason you want to not have all of these things saved to your project folder. These are previews and things that are built by Premiere Pro as they render your footage, meaning they read your footage and they're able to play, it's able to play back your footage in full speed, hopefully if you have a fast enough computer. And sometimes Premiere Pro has to sort of convert it in the background to a different file type, or at least pre-read it, basically. And these files are like the save as files. Premiere will automatically save your projects. I think it's important to leave it as in the same as project folder, especially if you're using an external hard drive or things like that, so that everything's saved. You can just take that whole folder, move it around, open it up on a different computer, and everything will be there without any problems. Ingesting, this is another advanced setting that we will get into in the future with, that's what's called proxy editing. If you're shooting and editing in super high resolution files like 4K or 8K or beyond, who knows what it's going to be in the next 5 to 10 years, You have a way of actually creating a smaller file size or smaller version of your video files to be able to edit quicker, have quicker playback, and things like that. But before we get into the weeds too much, all you really need to do is name your project and choose a location, and you should be good to go, and click OK. All right, so this is going to open up Premiere Pro. Your Premiere Pro might look a little different. So to get on the same page, what I want you to do very first is to go up to Window, Workspaces, and choose Editing. Or on this top bar, choose Editing. And in the next lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to walk through what all of this is. And we're also going to use our existing project file to do that. So we'll see you in the next lesson, and we'll have fun with learning about the layout of Premiere Pro. See you there. This is your orientation lesson to understand the layout of Premiere Pro. My goal by the end of this course is you're going to know exactly how to use it, all the tools and everything, but I know how daunting it can be right now. I think it's best if we actually open up an existing project to see how things are as we learn what all these windows and panels are. So the first thing you're going to learn how to do is how to close a project. There's different ways to do this, but we have this new project that we had created in the last lesson. You can right-click it and choose Close Project. Not Close Panel, but Close Project. Or go up to File and Close Project. And all of these different steps and tools that I'm showing you have keyboard shortcuts. So I'm on a Mac. Pretty much anything on a PC is going to be the same keyboard shortcut. Instead of using Command, though, which is this little icon right there, you're going to use Control on a PC. Or just, if it's different or you need help, it should show up here in the menu. So let's go ahead and close this project. And then we're back on this home screen. And so what we're going to do is open up the Premiere Pro course project. So if you haven't opened up that yet, go back to your supplemental resources and just double click that project. All right, so you should see something like this. If you don't see anything similar to this, make sure you let us know in the comments of the course, but you should see something like this. So let's go through and work around this application. Each of these panels has a different job. And it's titled in the top of the panel what it does. Some of these panels or windows have multiple tabs. So you can see here, this window right here has multiple tabs that I can click on. And if there's more than fit in this area, there will be a menu on the right-hand side, this double arrow that you can click down on and see all the other panels that are open. You can also organize the order of these panels by clicking and dragging and moving left or right depending on the order. I like to have my project panel first, and so that appears first. And some of these other panels I'm not going to even be using right now or really ever. But this first panel is the project panel. This is where we organize our footage. We add all of our assets, meaning video clips, audio, graphics. This is where we create new sequences, which are basically separate videos or timelines, and we'll be going over that in a future lesson. And you can see that I've already created folders and I've organized this project for you. So this is what it should look like for you. So this is your project organization panel. Let's actually go right. So moving to the right, you see these are all your tools. So these are different tools that you can use when editing. We'll go through those as well in the future. To the right of that is our timeline. So this is where we're actually laying down our footage, working, we're editing here, we're cutting up stuff, we're adding music, sound effects, adjusting levels, all kinds of stuff down here. You can move around the timeline right here. You put your little timeline indicator here. You can drag it, and then to play, you can press the space bar. And that's going to play this project that we've already created. So skipping over to our next panel, because there's a lot in here that we're going to learn how to do, but I don't want to get too detailed right now, is the program monitor. So up here, this is the preview of what we've already edited. So everything that we put down here in our timeline will appear up here. On the bottom of here, you have different tools for playback, rewinding, things like that. Other tools that we'll go over in the future of this class as well. And then if we move just going counterclockwise, we have this panel right here. There's a couple tabs in here that I want to show you. The source, this is if we are going through our footage or we want to preview any music or clips from our project panel, we can do that up here. To do that, you can find a clip. So these are just folders with drop downs that you can click and twirl down and then double click. And then up here, you can play through. Okay. So this is where you preview your footage before putting it down onto your timeline over on the bottom right. There's some other important tabs up here behind the source monitor, like effects controls. Now I'm not going to show you everything how this works, but if I click on, let's just find one clip to click on. Maybe this one right here. So this one right here, you can see that when I click on different clips, the effects control panel changes because there might be different settings or things that are different for the different clips. So you can adjust things like the size and position of your clips. You can adjust the rotation, all kinds of stuff. And then if you add effects like color correction or any other style of effect, again, we'll go into this all in the future, you will have that up here. And you can adjust all of that. I kind of skipped over this one over here. This is your audio meter. This is just a preview of what the audio sounds is like when you are playing through your footage. So if I play through the timeline, sourdough bread loaf, and it's not too difficult. So you see that bouncing up and down. And again, in the source monitor, I skipped over this, but there's some similar tools down here as on the program monitor to play and things like that. Everything we're going to go through in the future. The only other thing I want you to understand from this lesson is how to really organize and move things around. Say you want the program monitor to be bigger. You can do that. You can hover your mouse in between any of these windows and drag, click and drag, click and drag. And so now if you want a really big program monitor, you can go that way and drag it down and make it bigger. Maybe you need more space in your program or your project monitor, rather. You can do that. You can also get rid of some of these tabs that we don't need by right-clicking and choosing Close Panel, Close Panel, Close Panel. As you saw, you can click and drag to the left to reorder them, or perhaps you want to have one of these tabs opened in a new location. Maybe here's the effects panel that we didn't cover, but this is where all of your effects are. Maybe you want to have that open all the time. So I can click, and now I'm holding it, I'm dragging it around, and you can place it. So I can place it at the bottom of this window down here, and now you see that this split this window into two. And so our original tabs are up here. Or I can take it again. Maybe I want it on the right side of the source monitor over here, like that. Maybe I want my project file panel all the way on the left side of Premiere Pro. See how it's highlighting in green now? So now it creates a whole new, basically, column over here. So play around with it. You can also always go back to the original setting by going up to Window, Workspaces, and then choose Reset to save the layout. Another thing you can do is save a layout. So for example, if there's a certain way, depending on your monitors, or if you have a dual monitor setup, and you can do that with dual monitors, you can bring one of these panels to the other window or your other screen. You could actually have the program monitor, for example, be on a separate screen totally. you can save that. And you go up to Window Workspaces, save as new workspace for that. So you see that I have one here, and this is, let me reset to save layout so you can see the difference. So this is pretty much similar to the basic editing panel or workspace. And then I have Fill 2, which is where I do add graphics and color correction and things like that. Which brings up one other point. There are panels that weren't showing in our original layout. So let me go back to the editing workspace by clicking that right there. So this is where we were originally. There are other windows that do different things like Essential Sound and Essential Graphics. So if we want to do some sound editing, we can open up that panel by clicking there, and it opens up on the right. We can move it around, we can close it, all that kind of stuff. But we'll be working on this throughout the course. When there's a panel that I want to teach you or a new skill, I'll be showing you and making sure you know how to open it. For now, though, I'm going to go back to Window Workspaces and reset to save layout for editing. And I want you to just play around with it and then come back to the next lesson when we're going to be doing a little bit more with organizing our footage in the project panel and then moving on to actually adding footage to our timeline. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to import assets and organize them in our project. So I want to start a new project from scratch and actually rebuild this entire project throughout this course. So I think it's best if you follow along and do the same. Of course, if you want, you can just watch and use the existing project file and you're able to click around and see what I've done, but I think it's best if you follow along. So go ahead and click File, New Project, and we'll call this Learning Project. It's going to save in our same folder with all of our other assets already. So something new with Premiere Pro over the past several years is that you can open multiple projects at the same time, which is nice. There's even ways to work from one project to the next, a little bit more advanced, but that's also good to be able to do too. But with both of these open at the same time, I can kind of try to replicate this a little bit easier. To organize my footage, I'm going to click on the assembly workspace, which just makes my project panel a lot bigger. So the first thing you need to do is import media. So media is all of your assets we talked about. You can do that multiple ways. You can double click in this window. You can right click and choose import. You can go File, Import, Command I or Control I on a PC. Or what I often do is just simply dragging and dropping my footage or assets into this from my document finder. So say you have all of your footage that you shot from a recent video and it's on your hard drive or on an external hard drive. You may want to just bring all of that video in, or maybe you want to pick and choose ahead of time what you bring in. Either way, you can select that footage and click and drag it into your project panel. And you can see that it's brought it in, and you might have noticed really briefly, but there was this sort of loading bar down here. That's Premiere Pro reading your footage and getting prepared to actually play it back. So this is all in our project panel, but I want it more organized. So let's create a folder. You can do that by clicking the new bin or folder icon. You can rename it by typing in a name, or if you want to rename anything in here, what you just do is click on it and press the return button or enter key on your keyboard, and then you can rename it. You can also right click and get to all of these options that I go through pretty easily for most cases. And then just click and drag all of your footage in there. Okay? Another thing you can do though is just simply click and drag in an entire folder. So if I want to bring in all of this audio, a cool thing is I can just take this master audio folder and it's going to keep the same organization that's in my subfolders in my Finder, and it's going to keep it the same in here. Okay, so now it's all organized. A couple quick things to note about the project panel, just in terms of viewing it. There's different view options. So here's a slider. You can make it bigger or smaller if you want to be able to see a little bit easier. There's also different view options for icon view. So similar to in your documents, you can have this icon view. And when you do that, it actually opens up the bin or the folder as a new panel up here, a new tab. And so I can go back to my project tab here, but now I have this video bin up here. And I actually like this because when I'm going through my video, or if I want to just kind of quickly see, oh, I know I had a shot of me scoring my loaf of bread here. And so I can quickly find that by just hovering my mouse over this footage, and it kind of does a little preview, which you don't get here in the list view. There's also this freeform view. So this is a little bit different, and this is cool if you want to get creative with the organization of your clips or your project. So say you have a bunch of footage and you can literally just move this stuff around in this view. So for example, maybe I want all of my shots of my finished loaves of bread here. So I can just move all my finished loaves of bread there. Here's maybe footage of me talking that I can put here, etc., etc. You can just basically move it all around. And you can always go back to the more organized view here or the list view here. But that's a view that I don't use that often, but it's there if you're interested and that makes sense to you. Okay. All right, I'm back in my list view. So a couple other things to note. Let's drop down the video. You can organize this or change the view by alphabetical name. There's also all of these other settings that you can see, like the video frame rate, the media duration. These are things that might help you. Say you want to know, okay, what are my longest clips? Then you can organize by view by duration and automatically see that. This is getting pretty advanced, but you could also right click, choose metadata display, and then here there's all kinds of different options. The ones that are checked are already on. I've saved this as a standard preset. You can click save settings and then name it. But say you really don't need all of these things on here. I'm going to turn off media start and media end, for example, and click OK. Now those tabs don't appear, or those columns don't appear, rather. There's a search bar for searching. There's also these buttons down here that we'll get into when we actually start a new sequence. But the new item button is where you can start a new sequence. There's different things down here that we might use when we're actually editing as well. We saw the new item button. If you have a folder or any item selected in your panel, you can delete it by clicking this button. You can also just select it and then press the delete button or the delete key on your keyboard. I undid that because I want that. And that's pretty much it with the project panel for now. I'm sure there's going to be things that we cover in future lessons, but for now, what I want you to do is, if I go to my Premiere Pro course project, I want you to organize it like this. I want you to start a folder for sequences. I want you to have your audio, and we can actually slide music under audio. So really all you have to do is start a new folder called sequences, and then we'll see you in the next lesson where we actually do that. All right, see you there. In this lesson, you'll learn how to start a new sequence and understand a bit more about the timeline. So if you see the Premiere Pro course project and you open up the sequences folder, you'll see that there are different folders in here. We'll get to that in a minute, but right now you should just have a blank folder with nothing in it. And we're going to start a new sequence. What is a sequence? It's basically a new timeline or a new video where you'll be adding your clips and editing your clips on. So to start a new sequence, you click. There's different ways to do this, but the easiest way to do this from scratch is to click this new item button and choose sequence. This opens up a very confusing menu with lots of different options for different file types and things like that. And so if you have a camera and you know what type of video and format and settings you use on your camera, you might want to pick a very specific preset that's available here. But you might not have one for your camera, so you might need to go over to the settings panel. And within here, you can also choose all of that information. So if you know, for example, that you shot with a DSLR and your time base or your frames per second on your camera was 23976, you know that your frame size is 1920 by 1080, etc., you can set this all here manually. But there is a much easier way to do this that I think is going to work for 99.9% of you. If you're watching this and you ever need to create a custom sequence, maybe you do want to create a square sequence, for example, then you'll have to change this to square pixels first, but then you can choose and create a sequence that has a frame size of 1000 pixels by 1000 pixels. And so maybe you are creating something for social media where you need to do this. But if you're just trying to create a sequence that matches the settings of the clips that you've already shot, there's a much easier way to do this. And there's some other more advanced features here if you're shooting with VR and things like that. But that's not really necessary for this lesson. So I'm going to click, let me just click OK so you can see what happens. It creates this sequence file, basically, that underneath this folder where we added it. And now on our timeline, we have two tabs. We have the promotional video, which is actually for the Premiere Pro project. And then we have this new sequence right here that is blank. Now I'm going to close this. I'm going to delete it, actually. And I'm going to show you the easier way. I should have just started with the easier way, but sometimes you need to learn the hard way before you learn the easy way. To do it the easy way, you just find the clip that you want your sequence to match. For example, let's just start with video 1 and drag it into the new item button. And now it created this sequence and it added this sequence that's titled the same as this clip here in this folder. So I'm going to move that over to the sequences. And I'm just going to call this sequence 1. Okay. So you're probably like, Phil, why did we go through all that confusing stuff when you could have just told me that? Well, I hope you learned something. But you also notice that now we have this clip on our timeline and we can play through it. The entire clip was added when we just clicked and dragged that into the new sequence. And now this sequence matches the settings of this footage. If you want to see what those settings are, you can go up to the sequence menu and go to sequence settings. And here is that similar menu we saw when setting up a sequence, say that 10 times fast, with all of the settings. Editing mode, custom, frame size, etc., etc. Okay. The one thing that I'll just mention so you understand is that sometimes you shoot at different settings, or sometimes you shoot with different cameras. Maybe you shot 4K with one camera and then 1080p with another. Those are resolutions if you didn't if you didn't know yet that. Or maybe you shot at 60 frames per second with one camera and 24 frames on another. What you want to do is create the sequence based off of typically the common footage that you're using or the way that you are going to end up exporting your video. So if you're going to export your video at 1920 by 1080, then create a sequence at that with the footage shot at that format. Or if you want to make sure you export at 23976 frames per second, make sure you use that footage to start your sequence. You can always change this stuff later. You can also export at different frame rates and frame sizes. But in general, you want your sequence settings to match the footage that you're using the most. Now, there's some people that are going to say, Phil, no, that's not right. And I know there are some cases where that's not true, but for those of us just getting started out, that's a good rule of thumb. Another rule of thumb is if you have video of people talking, and I'm not talking about your extra footage of like what we'll call B-roll, your extra footage that you add on top of an interview, for example, or a vlog. But the footage of you talking, that's the clip that you want to start and create the sequence from, okay? We're going to move on to the timeline. I'm going to put that in the very next lesson, actually, so that these lessons aren't so long. But the last thing I want to clarify in this lesson is really when you would use different sequences. I've gotten this question a lot from previous versions of this course and students. So you would use different sequences in different ways. I use them as different versions of a video. For example, I might have a draft and then I'll copy that sequence and then make changes to the copy, and that'll be my second draft. Sometimes if I'm editing a very long documentary, I might have different scenes of the documentary or different interviews where I'll just edit that interview on, or each interview on a different sequence. Sometimes you will have a project file that is for a series of videos that you don't want a separate Premiere Pro project for every video because you're sharing perhaps the same video clips, the same music, the same other graphics and assets. And so you want that all contained in one project, but you would have a different sequence for every different video. For example, if you're a vlogger and you might want to just create a new sequence for every new vlog, for example. So you can use it as different ways. Usually it's just one sequence per video or doing it with drafts. So for example, if I want, I can just copy this. So copy and paste, or just on your keyboard, Command-C, Command-V. On a PC, that'd be Control-C, Control-V. And now I can see this version 1. So sequence 1, V1, or whatever you want to call it. And now I can open up this new version and make my edits. And so that way, if I'm working with a client and if I ever have to go back to an old version, I can do that easily. Okay, so I know this is a lot, but I hope that you're learning a lot and learning everything. I'm sure you're like, Phil, let's get to the editing, and we're going to get there. And first, though, I want to go over the timeline and understanding this in the next lesson. So now you know how to start a sequence. But how do we navigate the timeline, which is what we're going to be doing for most of our editing? I figured that the best way to jump right in and understand this is to look at our promotional video timeline. First, though, let's swap over to the editing view, which gives us a little bit more room on our timeline. I'm also going to stretch the timeline over all the way to the left and also take this and drag it up so that we can really see our timeline. And as I do that, I actually start to see some things that I didn't see before on my timeline. I'm also going to reopen my sequence 1, which closed when I went over to my editing workspace. And just because that it wasn't opened before when I was on my editing view. And so now I see both of these, and there's lots of differences going on, obviously, except not just that there's one clip here on this timeline, but there's lots of different things here. So to start out, let's understand what the basic layout. So if we start here, we have a video clip that has video and audio. The video tracks are right here where it says V1, that's this horizontal line. The audio track is down here. So when we started the new sequence, it automatically put this clip here on this track. But say we take another video clip, let's take video 2. I'm clicking and dragging it onto my timeline. And as you can see, I'm hovering over different tracks. If I want to put it on video track 2 and audio track 2, I can drag it there. Video track 3, etc. And so now, let's see, now it's on video track 2. You have multiple tracks because when editing, you're likely going to be layering multiple clips on top of each other, layering effects, adding graphics and things on different video tracks. And similarly with audio, you'll be layering multiple audio clips. So going back to my promotional video sequence, you can see that for audio on track 1, A1, I have talking head. It's my talking head clip. On track 2, I have my music. On track 3, I have my audio effects. And you can see that I'm clicking while I do this. Just to note, you can click and drag over your clips or your different media and select multiple that way. We'll get into how you edit and all this later. Another thing to note, the difference is that here you see these clips are a lot bigger. These tracks are a lot bigger. To make these tracks bigger or smaller, you can double click. You can also go to this little line in this area and click up and down. It's this space right here, this sort of blank space right here where you double click and it opens it up or closes it. We also see my footage right here, and this might be different for you. I want to make sure that it's the same. If you click this little wrench icon, it gives you all your settings for your timeline. And if you choose show video keyframes, it's going to show them or turn them off. Showing them does take up a little bit more computer power. So if it's just one of those extra things that if your computer is a little bit slow, you can turn off show video thumbnails. Okay. And that's just something to turn on or off. But I like having them to see them because now when I zoom in on my timeline, which I did by pressing the plus or minus key on my keyboard, or you can click this little bar down here and zoom in or out this way. Now I can actually see the clips or understand what those clips are. I can visually see, oh, this clip right here is of that book. Here's the clip of the sourdough loaf. And so it's easy for me to know how to move these clips around once they're on the timeline versus if I can't see them like this, or if these are smaller like this. Okay, so the tracks are smaller. Now it's hard to know what these clips even are. And one other setting that you might want to change because you might not see your thumbnails throughout the entire clip. If you click this menu, there's even more settings for your timeline. I have my thumbnails set to continuous video thumbnails. You can put it just at the head, which is just at the beginning, or you can put it at the head and tails. You'll probably see why you would do one or the other, but when I'm editing a long video clip, sometimes it's nice to have it throughout. But again, that's going to slow down your playback if you have a slower computer. So one thing just to turn on or off if you want. All right, so that's how you can preview. That's a lot of good stuff. Here in the audio tracks, when you expand this, you can see the waveform, which is a visual representation of the audio. And this is something that as you become more advanced as an editor, you really use this to edit your video. Sometimes I'll be playing through an interview and I can make edits based off of the waveform because I know, okay, well, there's a pause here, so maybe that's where they messed up or they were being asked a question. And I can see, okay, there's a blip here, a blip there. Those are cues to edit from. So just a good thing to view is the waveform. Again, you can turn that on or off here in this little wrench icon. Okay. There are a lot of other things in the timeline that we'll learn as we go. On the left-hand side, though, there are some other options where you can toggle on or off tracks. You can lock them. So say we want to not see track 2. You can turn it off right there. See, when I do that in the program monitor, you can actually see it disappear. Okay. If I want to lock a track, say I want to make sure that I don't move the music around that I've already laid down on my track, I can lock this track, and if I'm trying to select something or trying to select the music or I accidentally click it, I can't. See how I can click this clip and move it around, undo that, but I can't do that with the audio track. It's locked now, okay?
So that's helpful when you're editing different things, and like I said, maybe you've already edited your interview and you have all of video track 1 and audio track 1 done, and you want to lock those down, and now you just want to add B-roll, your supplemental footage, to these other tracks. It might be beneficial to lock those down. Down in the audio tracks, you have muting options, so you can mute a track like this. So now I'm only hearing the other 2 tracks with music and sound effects. Or maybe you just want to hear one track and you can solo it by clicking this button
in your own kitchen. In this video,
and this is very helpful if you have lots and lots of tracks. So sometimes I'm editing a project that has 10 audio tracks, different music tracks, multiple people talking on separate tracks, and I just want to hear one track. You do solo, or maybe you want to solo 2 tracks. Maybe I just want to hear my talking and my sound effects without hearing the music.
Spread right in your own.
I can do that. Conversely, I could have just muted the music track, but if you have lots of other tracks, that's where the combination of being able to mute multiple tracks or solo multiple tracks is very beneficial. This last one is a record button where you can actually start recording on a track, a voiceover with a microphone that is plugged in or your built-in microphone. These sliders over here also expand everything together. So instead of just opening one track, you can open all of them with this little slider over here. Same goes down here on the bottom for audio tracks. So that's a general understanding of the timeline and how it works. A lot of it's just playing around and getting used to it. And as we move forward with lessons, you're going to learn more and more about the features that we didn't cover in this video. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. In this lesson, we're actually going to start editing. We're going to be learning how to add clips to our timeline. I've gone ahead and closed the promotional video project file, and I'm just working on the new project that we started from scratch, because for the rest of the course, we're basically going to be going step by step into how I built out that project. But to keep things clean, I've just closed that project. So you should have a project open like this if you're following along with sequence 1. I'm actually going to delete this clip from sequence 1 and start from scratch. So when you start a new sequence, the way we did by dragging a video clip to that new item button, that clip is automatically going to be added to your timeline. And maybe that's the clip you want to start editing with or start your sequence with, but maybe it's not. And so I'm just going to start as if we don't have any clips now. So I'm going to open up my video folder. There's different ways. We've seen that you can simply just drag and drop a clip onto our timeline. So I'm going to take my talking head video file, and that brings the entire talking head video file down onto my timeline. If I want to add another clip on top of this, I can click and drag it on top of it onto video track 2 and audio track 2. Your sequence probably looks like this. We're going to get to these highlighted buttons in just a second, but I didn't want to confuse you. Yours should look something like this, though. So that's one way to add clips to your sequence. But what's a better, more efficient way? Because now we'll have to take these clips and find the right parts on our timeline, which we can do. And some editors like putting all your clips down on the timeline, and you can actually select multiple clips and just click and drag them down onto your timeline. You could even take an entire folder and drag it onto a timeline and then work here on the timeline with them. But I think a better way is to already go ahead and choose the best parts of your clip and add them to your timeline. So I'm going to delete these right there. Now I'm going to go and I'm just going to open up video clip 1 in my preview monitor, or my source monitor. It's already open. Now I can go through this and find the parts of the clip that I want. So maybe I want just the part of me pouring this flour into this bowl. To select that part, you'll need to set an in and an out point. You'll hear this often through this course, but in and out. It's basically setting the beginning and end of a clip or of a sequence that you want to use. So to do that, you have buttons here underneath the source monitor for in and out, or you have your keyboard shortcuts. And I really encourage you to start using keyboard shortcuts from the beginning. It's going to make you a much more efficient editor. So I can go to the point either playing or by scrubbing through to where I want to start and press I for that in point, and go to the end, say I want to end there, then press O or press this button. So now I have this selection, this highlighted selection here. How do we get this to the timeline? There's multiple options. I can click right here in the video, and it's going to drag both the audio and video down here, and I can select it on, put it on whatever track we want. If I just want the audio or the video for some reason, I can click one of these buttons, drag video only, and I'm just clicking and dragging it onto my timeline, or just the audio for some reason, I can do that. There's also a couple other options down here that add it to our timeline in different ways. So insert, or the comma key, is going to insert it into the timeline, and it's going to actually split any other clips that are in the way and just kind of squeeze it right in between. Let's undo that actually. Overwrite is going to lay this on top of whatever is there, and it doesn't split it and squeeze it in. It just lays it on top. So O or period for overwrite. See the difference? Let me undo that. So comma to split. See how that made it cut and then it split this talking head video in two? Or period to just overlay. Now you're also wondering, okay, Phil, that it's going on track 1 and 2, or audio track 1, video track 1. What if I want it to insert into track 2? Well, that's where these highlighted buttons here, this is your source patching right here. On the left column, the leftmost column, if we select the second track, and now we either press these buttons or the keyboard shortcut, it's going to add it to that track. It still is going to split it or overwrite depending on what button we press, but now it's being added to that track. Now say you just want the audio, or the video rather, unhighlight or uncheck this A1, and now if we press period or comma, and I can just keep going basically, it's going to just bring in the video, okay? And so there might be time where you've edited a video, or an interview, for example, and you're just adding your B-roll extra footage, and you might want to toggle off this source patching so that you're just bringing in the video, unless you want the audio from your B-roll as well. All right, so I'm gonna delete these clips on there. Now, there's this other column that we should probably learn, and this is track targeting. So this is a little bit different than the source patching, which is when we're adding clips from our project, whether that's video or audio clips or anything. Track targeting is more when you are working within your timeline already. So what I'm going to do to explain this is, say I copy this clip. So say I have a clip that I want to copy. This might be more relevant if I have like a graphic or something, and I want to paste it. Actually, let me go ahead and let me bring in another clip here. So I'm going to double click, find a spot that I like, in point, out point. See how fast that is? Now just bring in my video to that track. Now say I select this and I want to copy just this clip now. I'm going to open this up so we can see a little bit better. And I can actually bring this part down so I see more of my video track. If I copy and paste, what happens? It pastes it to track 1, video 1. If I unhighlight this, now it's going to paste to video track 2. It basically pastes to the lowest number that is highlighted. So if multiple tracks are highlighted, it's going to paste to the lowest one. So if I have V3 and V1, it's going to paste to V1. If I just have V3, it's going to paste to V3. So that's just something to note too when you're navigating around. And another thing too, let me just mention this is, so say we have all of these clips. Let me just drag and select multiple clips. We're going to put them down on our timeline in no particular order. Notice how all of these track targeting are highlighted. One way to navigate your timeline is to press the up and down arrow keys on your timeline or on your keyboard. And what that does is it moves your playhead, this marker, to the front or end of a clip. So see how every time I press down, it goes to the next sort of beginning or end of a clip, edge of a clip, you might say. Well, if I only want that to happen with the video track 1, I can make sure to unhighlight video tracks 2 and 3. And so this is something that I use, again, when I'm editing an interview and I have a bunch of cuts in the interview. I have, dozens of little segments of video. And then on tracks 2 and 3 and 4, I have lots of different audio effects, or not audio, but visual effects, graphics, B-roll, all sorts of other things. If I want to just quickly jump through the audio or the talking head footage, I can do that with the up or down arrows. But that's going to depend on what is highlighted here. And it's also going to depend on the audio as well. So if we have lots of different video or audio effects and things like that, the up and down keys are going to jump to those clips as well. Let me show you one more advanced way to add clips to your sequence. So let me just delete all of this. So say we go through our B-roll. Let's just go through and I'm just going to make some in and out points. And this is going to basically automate adding clips to a sequence. So that's video 6. For video 7, I'm just going to go from opening the door like that. Video 8, I already have selected. Video 9, I'm just going to skip. Video 10, a little shake of the flower. All right, so now I've put in and out points for these clips. So I'm going to select them. I'm pressing Command and clicking these clips. Select this button, Automate to Sequence. And so now it's going to add all of those selections that I've made to our sequence. You can do it either in the selection order of how I click them or the sort order. So for example, if I want this clip first, then this one, then this one, then this one, and then I press this button, I would want it to be selection order. Otherwise, you can do it different in order of the name, basically, or the sort, however it's sorted in your project panel. You can choose if you want to insert it or overwriting, so we know what that is already, but that's going to apply here if you already have clips on your timeline. If you're using just like photos or still images or still videos, you can choose to have it set to your in and out point if you've set those, or to a specific length of time in frames. You can also ignore audio or ignore video, or add default video transitions if you want. So if I click OK, now we already have a sequence with our selections with default transitions. So the cross dissolve, that's what this transition is, which we'll get to more in the future. That's already applied. So this is a great way if you're working with multiple editors. If you have an assistant editor for some reason, someday you can do it. You can have someone go in, make selections for the best parts of the clips, and then automate a sequence, or you can do it, and it just makes it much more efficient for creating montages and even vlogs and things like that. So that's how you add clips to your timeline. In the next lesson, we're going to learn more about how you edit your clips once they already are on your timeline with some of these tools over here. Thanks for watching. In this lesson, you'll learn about the different editing techniques and tools we have for editing footage on our timeline. So there's some instances where you can literally do what we learned in the last lesson and choose the right parts of a clip and add it to our timeline in the right order, and you'll be good to go. But most times I'm adding some footage that I've already previewed to my timeline, and other times I'm editing footage that I just place on my timeline. For example, with interviews, there could be two different techniques. So interviews or talking head. So here's the talking head video of me, and I could go through here and
Are you ready to
watch what's up here and pick the top parts and bring them to my timeline. But generally how I edit is I bring these entire clips down to my timeline, and then on my timeline, I start to edit them, okay? So how do we edit clips already on our timeline? The easiest thing is with our mouse, just our selection tool, which is the keyboard shortcut V. You hover over the end of a clip and you just click and drag to the left or right. And that's going to trim the end or the beginning of the clip, depending on where you are dragging from. There are other common tools like the razor tool. So say, let's go in here and remember how I mentioned with the waveforms, I can tell where I might make a mistake or there's a pause. If you're looking at this, you might see, okay, there's a space right here.
Let's keep
where I did make a mistake. And so there's where I would take my razor tool and I can make a cut. And this cuts our clip in half. And so now I have two clips. So I can actually cut make two cuts, and then I can take my selection tool and delete that part, and then click and drag
aromas of
these parts and put them together. Now notice one other sort of advanced thing or thing to know is that this magnet snap in timeline button is enabled. And you can feel that kind of when you are dragging your clips around the timeline. And as you get close to the end of a clip or where clips meet, it kind of locks or snaps in place. With this off, it's harder to do that. Sometimes you might want it not to snap if you're trying to do a precise movement. But generally, you'll want this on so that you can just snap it in place. Another thing to note is if you want to delete the space in between clips, you can actually select that space and then press the delete key. And to go even further, say we have multiple clips. So you'll notice that as we progress with this course, I start just using more keyboard shortcuts, and I'm not going to explain everything I do. But right there, what I did is I pressed C to take my razor blade tool, V to change to my selection tool, and then just drag this clip over to the right. So say we have maybe this is a 30-minute interview and you've made lots of cuts and you've just left what the good parts, the good sound bites. You can easily delete all of the spaces in between by going up to sequence, close gap. That's a good little trick to note. All right, so that's kind of the two major tools that you might want to know, the selection tool and the razor tool. Let's go ahead and take another clip down. So here, let's go this video 5. So this is a clip of me just dropping a loaf onto the parchment paper. So I'm going to set an in point and an out point. We're going to drag that onto our timeline. So the reason I wanted this clip is to show you these other tools. We've got our ripple edit tool. So what this does is if we take this tool and we click and drag the beginning of a clip, notice what happened. If I use the regular selection tool and I clicked and dragged, it would go like that. It just leaves it in place. But if I take the ripple edit tool, B on your keyboard, the ripple effect is basically effectively moving the clip after you make your edit. So it cut out the beginning of the clip that I'm erasing basically, and then moving the clip to my playhead. So it's basically removing one step of the process. So instead of using my selection tool, dragging, and then having to move this over, you can just use the ripple edit tool. Let's go to the slip tool. So the slip tool works a little bit different. So say we have this clip, and if you hover over a clip and you click and drag to the left or right, what you're basically doing is adjusting the in and out points of a clip. So I undid that just so you can see. So notice where my hand is right now. It's right up at the top of the frame, and I'm going to play through. Now, if I use my slip tool and I drag over to the right a little bit, and you can see a preview of the beginning and end of the frame, the first and last frame up there in the program monitor right now. The image on the left is now the very beginning of your clip, and the image on the right is the end. So notice now the beginning of my clip is my hand is here, and I haven't actually flipped over the bread yet. And so I basically edited the beginning and end of the clip without having to move this clip at all, okay? So I slipped it to that point because that's the exact moment I want. The other way that you could do this, the multi-step approach with just your selection tool, is to click and drag. So maybe we want to start there and then end right there. So select and drag. But that's an extra step or multiple steps. So I'm teaching you the tools that will automatically make you a more efficient, faster editor. All these tools will help you do that. All right, so some other things to note though. Say you want to edit multiple clips. So I'm going to take these clips and just extend them and put they're on 2 tracks now. And let me just close this. I think it'll be easier for you to see. So if I take my razor blade tool, if you want to cut all of these clips at once, you have to press the shift key. So that makes it a double razor blade tool. Extra power, right? So that will select or cut everything on your timeline. So even if let's copy and paste this. So copy this clip, paste it, and I'm going to move it up here. So again, razor blade tool without shift is just going to cut one. If I hold shift, it's going to cut everything, right? Another thing to note is with the slip tool, let me open up these waveforms so you can see. You can actually do this for multiple clips at the same time. So if I select 2 clips, so if I click talking head and shift click video 5, for example, and I click with the slip tool, you can see that the audio waveform is moving to the left or right as I click and drag to the left or right. So that's one thing to note. Another cool thing to note is that with the selection tool, you can actually get to these other tools easier, or at least to the ripple edit tool. So now notice the color of my mouse is red. And if I click and drag, that's just the regular selection tool. But if I press the command key on my keyboard, or control if you're on a PC, it's now the ripple edit tool. So now if I click and drag, it does a ripple edit. So you don't even have to press B on your keyboard if you want. Another thing to note with that is if I go in between 2 clips, so right here it only works, it turns into the ripple tool at the beginning. But if I go in between 2 clips, it turns into another tool. It's actually under the ripple edit tool, and you can get to it by clicking and holding down this tool to the rolling edit tool. And what this does is it will move both clip ends at the same time. So if I click and drag, See how it's editing both at the same time? If I just had my selection tool, it would only edit the one clip that I'm closest to. See how the little icon goes from left to right? That's the clip that it's pointing to. But if I go to the rolling edit tool, or if I press the command tool while I have the selection tool, it changes to that rolling edit tool. I know this is a lot right now, and you're like, well, I'm not sure when I'm going to be using these things. I think it's important just to understand that these tools are here. So as we move forward and I start editing our actual project, you'll know what these tools are. And in the future, you'll learn more case studies of why I use them. Now, the last one I want to show you is this track selection tool. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to randomly add a bunch of clips to my video sequence. Let's just add a bunch like this. Okay, so now with my track selection tool, A on your keyboard, you can click and it's going to select every clip on your timeline to the right of this, your timeline or your mouse. Or if I press the Shift key, it's going to just select every clip to the right on just that track. So the double arrow without Shift selected selects everything. The single arrow just selects everything on one track. And now if I press A and then A Shift, A Shift, that's how you switch from backwards to forwards. That's how you get to the different tools. This is very beneficial when I am editing, again, a long project and maybe on one sequence or one timeline, I have, this little section right here is maybe a little montage. Right here is a interview that I edited, and I just want to quickly select all of these clips. And yes, I can click and drag over them, but just pressing A on my keyboard and clicking, especially when you have lots more clips and you can't just click and drag. Maybe I'm zoomed in all the way on my timeline and I'm right here. I can't click and drag and get over everything as easily as just pressing A on my keyboard and making that selection. All right, so those are all the tools I want to show you right now for editing. They did get a little bit advanced, but in the next lesson, we're going to use these tools to start actually editing our interview video. But first, we'll learn how to actually sync audio from two different sources together, coming up next. To start our promotional video, what I want to do is sync our talking head video with our good quality audio. If you bring this talking head video into a new sequence and play through it,
Are you ready to make?
You'll notice that the audio isn't great, and that's because it's coming from the camera internal microphone. I was recording separately with an audio recording device, and you'll find that audio in the audio folder, the talking head audio. Now, automatically, you'll see if you have your waveforms turned on and your tracks open that the waveforms look very similar. So how do we sync this? This time I'm going to show you the easy way, and then I'll show you a different way. So with Premiere Pro, if you have two clips that you want to sync, just select both of them by clicking and hovering over both of them, or dragging over both of them. Right click and then go down to synchronize. Make sure you have audio selected, and the track, it doesn't really matter. Just leave it on track 1 if you just want to sync, and then click OK. And so now it will automatically sync the audio. So now if we play through it,
Are you ready to make?
It should sound pretty synced. And then if you mute one of the tracks,
Delicious bread right
the talking head video track, you will hear the good
in your
audio.
own.
Now, if you want to do this manually, or if you just want to double check and make sure it's perfect, you can zoom in here on the timeline, and you can actually see that the audio doesn't match up perfectly. So what you can do is you can move these clips around one frame at a time by selecting it and pressing the Command key and the left or right key arrow button on your keyboard. And that actually move your clips left or right. You could also move them around with your mouse as well. And so what I would do is just listen through.
Are you ready to make delicious bread?
And that spot right there is definitely more sync. So sometimes the automatic sync isn't perfect, so you want to double check it. But generally it does a decent job. But of course you want to have your lip sync perfect when you're editing video. So now what do you want to do? If you feel like you need to have your scratch audio, that's what I'll call the bad audio, just in case for some reason your good audio cut out or there was something wrong with it, you might want to leave this here and just mute it. You can also disable it by, what you need to do is actually just option click the audio, because right now the audio and video of this clip is connected, but if you option click one of them, you can select just the audio or just the video, then right click and uncheck enable. And for this clip, it's going to turn off the audio rather than muting the entire track, which you might have other audio later on.
Are you ready to?
So now that's one way to just have the good audio. Or since I know that the good audio is good to go, I can just delete this audio. So again, you'll need to option click it though, just to select that audio and delete it. Now what I would do is probably move our good audio up.
Are you ready to make?
I would trim the beginning to the beginning of the talking head video. And now I want these clips to be linked. Because right now, say I want to move the clip, but if I just click and drag the video, it's just going to move the video. So I'll have to select both and move them every time. But I want it linked. So what I can do is select both, click right click it and choose link. Or just select both and press the Command L button on your keyboard, or Control if you're on a PC. So now with it linked, it's going to keep those two clips synced. So now that I have my good audio synced to my video, the next step would be to edit this down to just the good parts that I want to keep. You already know how to edit clips, so go ahead and do that. In the next lesson, I'm going to walk through my process. It's going to be one of those bonus videos that if you don't need to watch it, you don't have to. It might give you some insight into what I'm thinking about when I'm editing a video. But either way, your goal and task is to go through and edit out the bad parts and cut this down to less than 30 seconds because we want our end video to be less than 30 seconds. So I'll see you in the next lesson if you want. Otherwise, we'll see you after that for moving forward with adding B-roll and other Premiere Pro tips and tricks. All right, welcome to this lesson on editing down a video interview. This is going to be more of one of those bonus lessons where I kind of walk through my process, and hopefully it's beneficial to you if you're interested in that. What I always start with is, what's the end goal? What are we creating? So for this video, we could say, oh, well, I want to make a 30-second social media promo, or maybe it's a 15-second promotion. Having that in mind will really affect the amount of sound bites and talking head footage that I want or need. And so it's always a good idea to have that in mind. Since this clip starts at just over 48 seconds or so, it's going to be pretty close to 30 seconds once I just cut out the mistakes. So let's go ahead and do that first. So what I do is basically just play through and listen, and let's see how it goes.
Are you ready to make delicious bread right in your own kitchen? In this video, I'll show you the exact steps to making your first sourdough bread loaf. And it's not too difficult. I'll show you the entire process step by step with the ingredients you need. And by the end of this lesson,
Okay, so there was my first mistake. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to use my razor blade to make a cut there.
The end of
playing to see if I got it right this next time.
With this video, you will know exactly how to fill your kitchen with the sweet aromas of a freshly baked loaf of bread.
All right, so I end there.
Let's keep
Then I make a couple mistakes. So I'm going to make another cut there. So I'm going to go back to this part and remove that mistake.
Process step by step with the ingredients you need. And by the end of this lesson, I'm going to
take out that and by the end of this lesson. So this is where I'm using those keyboard shortcuts. And this is my process. There's more efficient ways, but I'll just walk through the sequence of what I'm selecting. So I use the razor blade to make that cut. Then I'm going to press A to take my track selection tool, and I'm selecting everything to the right and dragging it over to the left. Now, a different way to do that would be to, with my selection tool, just delete and then delete that space. Same outcome, different way to get there.
By step with the ingredients you need. And by the end of this...
All right, so that's good. Now here we have a couple mistakes.
Let's keep... If that sounds good to you, let's keep going. If that sounds good to you, keep watching this video.
All right, so I like the beginning of this one.
If that sounds good to you, let's keep going. If that sounds good to you,
I can see also that my audio spikes right here. So watch the audio meter over here.
If that sounds good to you,
see how it gets into the red and it actually hits the 0 up here? And you can also hear it if you're listening. It's distorting.
If that sounds good to you.
And that can be fixed, especially using Adobe Audition. You can do some really good work on distorted audio, and I have a tutorial on my YouTube channel on how to do that. But for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to cut that part out. So I want the beginning right here, and then the end right here. And notice it might seem to you like I'm clicking randomly, but look I'm looking at the waveform, and I am taking this stuff, and I know that's the good stuff.
Sounds good to you? Keep watching this video.
All right, so there's some jump cuts in there. I'm not sure if it's going to end up as covered with B-roll or graphics, but for now, that's good.
I'll leave it up to you.
The end of this is just me giving you a little special note as you watch this class. And look we are so close to 30 seconds. But I also know that for promos and things like that, I don't want just wall-to-wall talking for the whole 30 seconds. So now I'm going to have to go in here and think about more creatively, what do I want to cut out?
Are you ready to make delicious bread right in your own kitchen?
Now that's a good intro line, really engaging, or hopefully engaging.
In this video, I'll show you the exact steps to making your first sourdough bread loaf.
So engaging intro then follows up with exactly what we're doing. Both of those sound bites are, I think, necessary.
And it's not too difficult. I'll show you the entire...
Okay, that it's not too difficult thing, I think that's kind of just like fluff that we don't need. So here's a way to make this edit really quickly. So I use my razor blade tool to make that cut. Now, with my selection tool and the Command key selected, which is really the ripple edit tool, I can click and drag over here and get rid of that little segment. And it automatically moves everything to the left to match up.
Bread loaf. I'll show you the entire process step by step with the ingredients you need. And by the end of this video...
Okay, and I think with the ingredients you need, I don't need that part. So again, I'm gonna hold the Command key to ripple edit this end of it.
By step. And by the end of this video, you will know exactly how to fill your kitchen with the sweet aromas of a freshly baked loaf of bread. If that sounds good to you, keep watching this video.
Okay, I think that's pretty good for now. So what I want you to do is get to a similar place. You might take out other bits of the video that you think aren't as interesting, or maybe you want to cut this down to 15 seconds. However you want, go ahead, make your edits, and we'll see you in the next one as we start adding B-roll. In this lesson, I'm going to be showing you how I add B-roll to this sequence. This is another bonus video where you might want to just skip ahead to the next lesson that makes sense to you. But if you want to see my process, keep watching. If you do skip ahead, make sure you go through and add B-roll to this sequence however you see fit. And we'll see you in the next lesson. If I was to post this video online as is, it would be pretty boring and it wouldn't really do its purpose of trying to get someone to watch my video on making sourdough bread. Obviously, we want someone to see the end result and see what they're going to actually be doing, and that's why we have B-roll. So there's different ways that I add B-roll, and we've already seen how you can set your in and out points up here in your source monitor and bring it down. But generally, if I'm doing a documentary or a talking head video like this, I need to think about what type of B-roll I'm putting down on my timeline first. I don't just throw any pretty shot down. I have to think storytelling wise, what do I want to do? So if I'm making a video about a sourdough course or lesson, I want to show off that sourdough bread from the very beginning. And so going through my B-roll, I see that I have a few different clips of the final bread shot. And this is the one that I started out on in the original video. I also have this one right here, which is a different version of the same shot, more of like a reveal. That's pretty cool. So as I'm playing through that, I'm pressing the I and O buttons, and I'm just going to take that B-roll down here, and that'll be our opening shot.
Are you ready to make delicious bread right in your own kitchen?
So I want another shot right to cover this video until this point. So let's have another, let's see if we have another end shot. That's a good one for the end. I use that one for the end, this reveal shot. So I'm going to just put this down. I'm not exactly sure where it's going to go, but I'll put it down at the end. Here's another one that I used towards the end. So this was on autofocus, and I don't like how that autofocus wasn't good right there. So I like this second part right here where I'm putting down my fourth loaf of bread for the day. So I'm going to put this down over here on the end. I'm also going to open up this track so I can see the actual clips that I'm adding down here. So those are sort of my final shots. Let's find, I think I used one of these shots of the book for the beginning, so we can see sort of the visual definition of what we're learning. It's a little shaky, but we'll be able to fix that with an effect.
Are you ready to make delicious bread right in your own kitchen?
Not sure if that's the most engaging shot or not. Maybe this shot right here, me throwing down some flour, might be a better one. So I'm just going to drop that. I'm just going to drop it over that shot that I just put down.
Delicious bread right in your own kitchen.
I mean, throwing flour down, that's kind of a typical shot you might see for a cooking show. It's a good introduction. Maybe this one. So I'm not sure if I'm going to use the first one or the second one. And that's why I put this on this third track, so I have both available.
Right in your own kitchen. In this video, I'll show you the exact steps to make.
And so I want to see my face right when I start saying
in this video,
that part.
I'll show you the exact steps to making your first sourdough bread loaf.
I think that whole part I can have my face on the video, and so I'm just going to trim these clips by selecting both of them, make them a little shorter.
In this video, I'll show you the exact steps to making your first sourdough bread loaf. I'll show you the entire process.
So then I kind of talk about the process, and so I want to show more of that process in the order that it actually is when you're making sourdough. So after sort of laying down some flour, let's see, out of all these shots, probably the next one is this one right here where I'm folding the dough. That one, dropping it on the table. And I made this cool little sequence in the original video that I want to kind of replicate. So I'm just going to the spots. This is a slow motion shot. This was shot in, I think, 240 frames per second. So it's super slow. So I just want that spot right there. And then these folds, boop. and then this next fold. Boop. Okay, so now it goes from one to the next.
Process step by step, and by the end of this video, you will know.
Cool. So there's that. And then after that, I think this is the shot. And you wouldn't know this as someone who doesn't make sourdough bread, but you wouldn't know the order of these shots, but I do. So this is...
You will know exactly how.
The next one in the sequence, and then maybe a close-up shot of the scoring. Like that.
How to fill your kitchen with the sweet aromas of a freshly baked loaf of bread.
The order of these last two shots aren't right. We want to open the oven, and then we see the final bread.
Of a freshly baked loaf of bread. That sounds...
Okay, so I've gone through this a lot faster than I would go through it if I was doing this the first time. I've obviously already gone through and made this video. And so we're going to keep working through and seeing what we do and just step by step add different things, transitions, titles, music, and everything throughout this course. But for now, if you've gone through this video, I want you to do the same. Pick out some of your favorite B-roll, and maybe you want to see my face more, or maybe you want to cover my face up as much as possible. However you want, I want you to end up with some sort of sequence similar to this, with a talking head video and B-roll on top of it, and then we'll move on to the next lessons. Cheers. One of the last basic editing things you might want to know when you're editing your videos is, how do I resize the footage? How do I make it bigger or maybe move it around in the frame? And that's all in your effects control panel. We saw this before at the beginning of the course. But say we go to a clip where we want to change the position. So look at this clip right here.
I'll show you the entire...
See how my head is kind of getting in the way of the footage? Maybe I want to zoom in a little bit so I'm not seeing as much as my hair. So with this clip selected, make sure you have it highlighted. Up in your effects control tab, you have your video properties, and under motion, you have scale. This is going to be the size, so you can click and drag to the left and right to zoom in or out. The sort of standard setting is 100. You can kind of think of it as like 100%. You can also click in here, and let me actually make this a little bit bigger so we can see. You can click in there and type in a specific number. And then to move it around within the frame, you can use this position number, and you can use the first one to move it along. That would be like the x-axis, I guess. So moving it to the left or right. And then this next one is the y-axis, or up or down. And so we can kind of move it around here. You can also double click here in your program monitor and move your clip around. You also see when I double click, we have these handles on the sides that allow us to actually make it bigger and smaller right here, which is another way to do it if that's more intuitive to you. So now if we play through this,
I'll show you the entire process step by step.
It's not as distracting as the other one. Although now that I think about it, it doesn't match up with this shot as good, which I kind of liked in the original video, but that's okay. The purpose is to understand how we use these tools. Now, say we want to make something skinnier. I don't know why you would want to do this with video, but you can uncheck the uniform scale, and now you can stretch or squeeze a clip. That might be something you do more creatively. Rotation, so you can rotate your footage. And then anchor point, this is, we'll learn more about anchor points in a future lesson and why that's important. But if I double click my video, you can see that there's this little point in the middle. That is our actual anchor point. If you've used Photoshop or other Adobe applications in the past or design apps, this is the point where these settings adjust from. So if we adjust the scale, it's actually scaling in and out from that point. If we rotate, we can rotate from that point. If we move the anchor point, So say we move the anchor point up to this corner, and now we rotate. See how it rotates from that point? So this is going to come in handy in future lessons, but just note that that's where the anchor point is. Anti-flicker filter. This is something that you might use if you are shooting in certain lighting situations that get a lot of flicker, but generally you're not going to use that. Opacity. This is the opaqueness of your video. So if you want to make these two clips kind of blend together,
the entire process,
you can do that. These buttons up here are to create masks. We'll learn more about that in the future, as well as blend modes, also time remapping and speed. All of that's going to come up in future lessons, but I just wanted to show you where those settings are for now. So when you're editing your videos and you're wondering, how do I move it around? It's all up there, or simply double clicking and dragging around. All right, that's video properties. We'll see you in the next lesson. When making any edit, if you are doing a simple cut between different clips, there's actually different ways that you can do this to build emotion and to tell your story better. So let's watch through this sequence that I've built out, and I've used 3 different types of cuts. I want to see if you can understand what's going on before I explain what straight cut versus J cut and L cut actually means. So pay attention to the cut and the audio. All right, so that was the straight cut version, and here's the J cut version. And lastly, we have the L cut. All right, so hopefully you could tell what was going on between the audio and the video. All of this footage that I'm using is from storyblocks.com, hashtag not sponsored, but it's a great website for video, sound effects, and music. So I don't have these included in the downloadable resources of the course if you're taking this course, but you can use your own footage to sort of create this style. So hopefully you notice that with straight cuts, when I'm cutting from one clip to the next, the audio just matches the cut. And you can see that here on the timeline. As I cut from the shot of the car driving to the shot of hiking, it cuts the audio as well. And then next to the waterfall. With the J cut, the audio from the next shot starts to be heard before the next shot is heard. So here we're going to see the shot of the driving car, but we're going to start to hear the audio of the hiking boots, which is this clip down here, before we actually see the hiking. And similarly, we're going to hear the audio for the waterfall before we actually see that waterfall shot. Okay? And then the L cut is sort of the opposite of the J cut, where you hear the audio of the first clip during the second clip or during the preceding clip. So here we're going to see the car driving. We're going to hear it, and then we're going to continue to hear the shot of the car driving while we see the hiking shot. And then I did the same thing for the waterfall clip. This one's a little bit more, you can see it a little bit better and hear it, when you see the audio of the waterfall and then, or hear it, and then in the next shot of the lady looking around, you still hear that waterfall. So this can be more easily visually seen when I show you this talking head clip just with the shot of me talking about bread and then the bread. So here's the straight cut, and you can see that it's just the B-roll shot of bread with no audio, and then it cuts straight to the talking head.
Are you ready to make...
Here's a J cut, and the reason we call it a J is because the look of the clip. So here is the clip that is actually synced. It's a little bit different with the previous sequence because the audio wasn't actually from the video. That was just sound effects that I added. But here you can really see the J of this clip. And here we hear the audio of me talking while this B-roll clip is being shown before you see my face.
Delicious bread right in your own kitchen. In this video, I'll show you the exact step.
So that's a common approach to editing. And then the L cut is the same thing, but opposite, where you see my face and then you see the video of the bread, but I'm still talking. The previous clip's audio is still being heard.
Are you ready to make delicious bread right in your own?
So why would you use these different cuts? Well, with the J cut, I think that it builds anticipation for what's going to happen next, especially with the previous sequence where you might have heard the footsteps or you hear the waterfall before you see that shot. You're building anticipation for what's coming next, or you're actually giving sort of a hint at what's coming next. With the L cut, you're sort of meandering through the shot and the sound, and so you're actually hearing what's still from that previous shot. It sort of resonates for a little bit of extra time, and both of these are just a great way to transition from one shot to the next or one scene to the next and really combine the two rather than just having a straight cut. Although straight cuts are definitely warranted in situations as well. I'm not saying that you can't do straight cuts. I'm just saying that using a J cut and an L cut are a creative way to blend two scenes or two shots together. All right, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on this editing technique in Premiere Pro. Obviously, you can do this in any editing application as well. And I look forward to seeing you in another tutorial. Cheers. Welcome to this new section of the Premiere Pro course all about transitions. Transitions are basically how you get from one clip to the next, both video and audio. So what we've done so far is we've butted up different clips next to each other, and it's basically just a jump cut from one clip to the next. A typical transition you might think of is like a fade or a dissolve. And all of our transitions that we have in Premiere Pro can be found in our effects bin. So actually, I'm going to close some of these bins or these panels that we don't need. You could do the same if you want because we're just not using them. I typically only have my project panel and then any bins that I have open and my effects panel over here. Under here, we have all of our effects, which we'll get into in a future lesson, but under video transitions, we have a number of transitions. So if you look under dissolve, for example, we have cross dissolve, which you can now drag and drop on the end of a clip, the beginning, or in between clips. So let me drag it in between these two clips right here. And now we have a dissolve. Now, you can see that the dissolve is kind of highlighted, and that's because it is our default transition. And there's a keyboard shortcut and a quick way to add that by either selecting in between a clip. So see how when I click in between on that cut, it highlights in red? If I press the keyboard shortcut Command D, it adds that cross dissolve, that default. Okay? I can even select multiple clips and press Command D, and look at that. It adds that already to all of them. All right, so now let's delete them, which you do by just clicking and deleting. And let's just start with this first one. And so say we want to make this dissolve faster or shorter. You can hover over the end of this transition and click and drag in, and it's going to make it shorter. You can also change the position of it. So I can click it and drag to the left or drag to the right. This is going to be a little bit more apparent when we're talking about transitioning from two different shots. So let's actually make some room. I'm going to press A on my keyboard, click and drag that there, and I'm just going to put this B-roll clip down here for now. So now if I select here, and you can also right click and choose apply default transition if you want. So now it's kind of right in the middle, but if I drag over to the right, now this first shot extends into the second shot a little bit more. If I do the other way, the first shot ends right at this part of the transition. So it's just different ways to extend or make your transitions shorter or longer. You might run into a situation where, let me actually just take another clip. Let's find another clip to show you a problem that a lot of people have. So say I take just this entire clip, and actually not the entire clip. Let's just take a little part of it and put it in the beginning. So notice on the timeline how this clip has this little thing in the corner. That denotes that this is the very beginning of the clip. There's no footage to the left of the playhead, right? This is the very beginning. So say I add a default cross dissolve. Notice that I can't move it to the in between of this clip like we did before. Same thing, if I click and drag, it's not letting me add it in between both. And that's because I can't have a dissolve start before a clip starts, right? So say I actually instead, and visually what I'll do, I'll move this here for now so you can kind of see. Say I cut it here, and then I bring this clip down here. Now we know that there's some room on the left of the playhead. So if I take my cross dissolve, and now I can choose to put it right in between the clips, and I can move it around left or right. But you might run into a situation where you're playing with clips and you're like, I can't move the dissolve to where I want it. Just make sure you're paying attention to where your clip ends and begins as well. Let's just look at a couple of these other ones. So we've got an iris box. There's all sorts of them. And so you play through it. Some of them are a little corny, I will say. And so go through these, see which ones you like, which ones you don't like. I usually use just cross dissolve or under, under dissolve, we have dip to black and dip to white. These are the two that I use. Nice fades, okay? Also note that if there's no clips on the timeline underneath your clip, if I do a cross dissolve, it's the same thing as a dip to black, right? Because it's basically dissolving to black. And you notice that when I added a default transition to this video clip with the audio, it adds it to the audio as well. We'll be looking at that in just a minute though. And so if this was over this clip now, it's not a dip to black, it's just a dissolve onto this clip, but with the video that's underneath it, in the track underneath it, appearing, okay? So if you want a hard dip to black, right here, for example, you would have to change it to the dip to black. And you can actually just quickly swap out transitions by selecting another one and dragging it over, and it's gonna swap it. And it'll swap it with the same length that you had edited it to, okay? So it's not just changing out to the default. It's actually changing based off of the length and the position of it. All right, so that's how you add video transitions. In the next lesson, we'll learn about customizing them a bit more. Just like videos, our transitions also have properties. So if I add this push transition between these two clips, see how it pushes from left to right? We can adjust that. So if we want to make it faster, we can just make the transition shorter. But if we select that transition and go up to effects controls, you'll see that we actually have some settings for our transitions. Up here in the top left is sort of a representation of the direction of the transition. So right now it's defaulted to the left side, but if we click east to west over here, it's going to change the push from east to west. Top to bottom here. You also have some other effects down here, like if you want a border. So let's set a border, I don't know, let's just make it white. So setting a number, and then when you click that color panel right here, you can choose a color and see how there's a border now. So maybe you want sort of a border in between your clips with your brand style or things like that. You could also just quickly reverse it. So that's a quick way. Instead of changing from top to bottom, bottom to top, you can just do a reverse, okay? And then if for some reason you want to change the beginning or end point of the transition, let me just go to the beginning. And then if I move this up, for example, right here, it's just gonna start the transition right there. So if you want more of like a jump cut into this transition, you can do that. I don't know really why you would. Now, with all of these different transitions, they're gonna have different properties. So you really gotta just kind of play around with it. Let's go ahead and do our barn doors. Let's see if there's different ones for barn doors. So it kind of splits out from the middle. Similar thing. So if you want from top to bottom, you can, up or down. You have the same with the border, same with the start and end. Let's go do one of these 3D motion ones. Cube spin. Okay, so let's see what this looks like. Boop. It's kind of like a spin move. Same thing. You can reverse it. Here in the preview, if you choose that show actual sources, that's what you're seeing here. Flip over. This is one where you have an option for what the background color would be. So see how this flips like that? It creates this sort of background gray color, which you can change here. Custom fill color. Oh, nice neon green. Love it. That's classic. That's like totally modern technique right there, right, guys? Okay, I'm just joking. But now you know that with all of these transitions, there will be some properties as well. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next lesson. In this lesson, I want to show you a couple techniques for transitioning between two talking head clips of the same person where there's a jump cut. So there's different ways to go about this. Some people just don't mind jump cuts. So let me turn off my B-roll track so we could watch these clips right here. Dough, bread, loaf. I'll show you the entire process step by step. So I think with modern YouTube culture and style, a lot of people edit with jump cuts. When I went to film school, this was a huge no-no. It was like a law that if we had a jump cut, we had to cover it with B-roll or something. One thing that you can easily do is just change the size of one of the clips. So you go from a 100 scale to maybe like a 115 scale. And the other thing you want to do when you jump cut from size, you want to make sure your eye line is at the same place. So I'm going to actually move this clip down just a little bit so our eye line is about at the same line. Let me just show you something really cool that you can do. If you want to, you can actually show guides. So let's drag this down onto our window. So these are all a bunch of additional options that you might want to see on your playback program monitor. Guides, if we show guides and we need, let's see, rulers as well. we turn on rulers and guides. This is, again, similar to Photoshop. We can actually click and drag from the outer edge where these rulers are, and we can put a guide right where my eyes are. And this way, we can actually go in and we can adjust our video to make it perfect so that our eye line,
I'll show you,
stays the same. All right, so we can turn that on or off there. And so now this jump cut looks a lot more natural with that
bread loaf. I'll show you
jump, especially with the eye line. Another thing, though, that Premiere Pro has is, and let's undo what we just did, and a quick way to do that is to copy the motion settings from one video to the next. So now you can see that's a much more sort of natural jump cut in some people's minds. I like it with the little bit of scale change and with the addition of the eye line being matched. So what you could do now is, if you have multiple clips without any B-roll, you can actually take this exact setting and paste it to the next clip that you want to jump to. So here we have another jump cut. To quickly do that, we can actually copy these properties. So select the clip that you want to copy from, click the motion, highlight motion, and press copy, Command C, and then go to your new clip and paste it, Command V. And see how it just pastes those settings?
of bread. If that sounds good to you, keep watching this.
So that could work if you want to do that way. Now let's actually get rid of these settings. So actually, let's just go back to our original, which you can do by typing in the original numbers, or what you could do is copy our settings from our original. And Premiere Pro has a really cool effect called Morph Cut, which actually tries to magically make our transition look like there's no cut, basically.
Loaf. I'll show you.
So when we add this transition, you'll see that it's analyzing in the background, and this will happen depending on the effect we add. Some effects or transitions need to process before it works. And so now let's play through this.
Bread loaf. I'll show you the.
Did you even see it? It doesn't even look like there was a jump cut. Now, if I go frame by frame, you can see that there's sort of some weird stuff happening with my hand right here.
Bread loaf. I'll show you the.
But in terms of my face, it actually morphs my face.
Loaf. I'll show you the.
So that it looks like it's one continuous shot. Sometimes making this shorter does a better job, or longer, depending on what it's actually morphing. But this is just another tool up your belt if you're trying to cut together two video clips of someone talking and you don't have any B-roll, or you don't want any B-roll to cover it.
I'll show you the entire.
That was more of a jump cut, so maybe longer. But really, it's up to you. I think in terms of the options you have is just to stick with the jump cut, to do a scale adjustment, to use this morph cut or another. I don't like cross dissolves. It looks sort of outdated to me. Or just to add and cover it with B-roll.
I'll show you the entire.
Yeah, I think for this one, longer works better.
I'll show you the entire
It's a little awkward, but I think for someone watching it, they're not really going to notice that in this sense. I think we notice it because we're watching it over and over.
I'll show you the entire process.
It's pretty amazing. It doesn't always work, though, depending on the position of your head and everything in your mouth. But try it out. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next lesson. In this video, you'll learn how to add audio transitions to your audio in Premiere Pro. So under Effects and under Audio Transitions in this panel, we have a crossfade folder, and there are 3 different fades or transitions for audio. And so if we go ahead and drop one of these on, let me just play this sound so you can hear what it sounds like without a transition.
Are you ready to make?
This is a basic, all 3 of these are basic fades in or out. So let me drop this one on here at the beginning.
Are you ready to make?
So you can kind of hear that it ramps up. And if I extend this, it will be even more pronounced.
Are you ready to make delicious bread?
So it goes from lower volume, 0, no sound, to whatever the volume or level of your audio is. Now you might be wondering, what are the differences between these three? Constant power is the default, so to add that as a keyboard shortcut, you can press Command-Shift-D. So that would be Control-Shift-D on a PC. Contrast that with the default video transition, which is just Command-D. Command-Shift-D is the audio transition. Constant power does sort of, if you look at my mouse, it does sort of a gain, like it ramps up. Constant gain is just a straight line. If you're thinking about levels, and it just goes from 0 to 100% volume, basically, just at a constant rate. Constant power and exponential fade have more of a gradual sort of ramp up and sounds a little bit more natural. To be completely honest, I stick to constant power for all of my audio transitions.
Ready to make delicious
exponential fade, you can see it ramps up even longer, okay? So that's how you add audio transitions. This brings me to another skill in Premiere Pro that you want to know, and that has to do with manually placing points on our audio tracks to create manual fades in or out. And so to do that, you need to make sure that you see this line right here. If you don't see that line, click on Timeline Display and make sure you see Show Audio Keyframes. We're going to talk about keyframes in the future, but all you need to know about it right now is that you need to use the pen tool, or P on your keyboard, to set a point on this keyframe line. And if you set a point, that's just going to mark it in that place and say, okay, at this point in time, we want this level of audio to be right here, 100%, or for this audio clip, basically 0 dB. Decibel or dB is the calculation or the number reference for audio levels. What we can do now is actually set another point on this keyframe line. Say we go to the beginning, and if we just click there, it just sets 2 points. Nothing happens. But if we go ahead and click and drag down, what you can see now is a visual representation of what a ramp or a fade would look like.
Are you ready?
So that fades in like that. And while it's doing something very similar to what constant power or constant gain or exponential fade might do, you have the ability to create more customized fades ins or fades out. So say I want to bring down the audio in this little blank space right there where I'm not talking.
Are you ready to make delicious?
Now that sounds a little bit funky, but this is a case study of where you might bring up the levels, down the levels of, say, an audio effect or music. And we'll get into that in the next section of this course, all about audio and audio editing. But I just wanted to give you a quick preview here of what this is, what this line is, and that you can use it for creating your own custom fade in or fade out. So if you know, really you want to make this specific to just 2 seconds, you can put a point at 0 and then at 2 seconds and fade it in like that. Now, of course, you could do a very similar thing. Let me delete this by clicking that point, clicking this point and delete that. Go back to my selection tool. If I take constant power, you can do a very similar thing just by extending this. And when you do this, when you drag, you can actually see how long. There's a little preview. See the duration underneath my cursor where it says 2 seconds? Right there. You can get it exactly there.
Are you ready?
So there's multiple ways to do things in Premiere Pro, like always, but I just wanted to show you both of those ways because we'll be looking at keyframes for both audio and video and effects in the future. All right, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next lesson.